So, welcome to the Blue Swan podcast. We are lucky to have Luigi Gonzalez today. He has produced multiple top 10 Billboard hits, multi-platinum, Grammy nominated, and then a couple of good projects underway, and the rest is all you.
Hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you, man. Nice to meet you. Good to be here. Good to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Anytime.
So, yeah, well, basically, yes, I've been around in the industry for over 30 years now. I started as a producer, orchestrator for artist from Mexico. His name is Juan Gabriel, and I produced an album for him that went double platinum back in the early 2000s. And that got me my first Grammy nomination for Best Latin Album of the Year, category pop, I think it was. Basically, after that, I started working on the electronic, music scene, producing for different artists and remixing back in the 2000s. And I had the opportunity to work with, Ricky Martin, Madonna, CeCe Peniston, Cyndi Lauper, Barbra Streisand, and so many other artists. Um, and I was part of a production team. We were two guys. Eddie X was a DJ, my co-producer, and myself, Lugo. Uh, and we basically every month we were on the top charts with different, not only major artists, but as also new artists as well. And yes, as I mentioned, we got the opportunity to work with Madonna directly, with her when she was with Warner. And basically we did the main remix for Hung Up. It was an official remix. We were only two teams. One was Junior Vasquez, and us, LEX, right? And that song, not only the song, but the remix charted number one in Billboard, for several weeks. That also led to produce, remixes for Barbra Streisand, Night of My Life, a song that she co-wrote with Barry Gibb. Donna Summer, we produced, I think it was the last record before she passed. It was called I've Got Your Love. I think it was number six in Billboard as well. I recorded the vocals, produced the vocals for that as well, um, which was hilarious to receive Donna Summer in the studio. Because I grew up listening to her, and she showed up in the studio telling us all these stories about the building that we had the studio back in the day. It was it used to be Casablanca Records. And then we had a tight studio there, and she told us all the stories about all the parties that used to happen, in Casablanca Records, in the 70s and the 80s and stuff like that. So anyway, recording her that day led us to get these amazing vocals that eventually made the song chart number six in Billboard as well. After that, I started working with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis for a few years on and off. We did some things for Janet Jackson and some other artists from Japan, Tiana Chow and Crystal K. We did some stuff there. I was doing some mixing for them as well, some engineering as well. Then I started working a little more in the Latin industry. Got a few singles. Went back to the Latin industry for some stuff and opened a company together with Alejandro Montesinos, who was my business partner. We had a company called True Makers Music, and it was a record label slash branding company. And we started producing two artists. And when the pandemic came, everything changed for everybody, So that's when I started working more on TV, doing more stuff for TV, advertisement, stuff like that, and developing. I started developing artists right now. I mean, back then. And right now, I have two artists that I've been developing that I'm currently signing. And yeah, and now I'm starting to focus more on my solo career as an electronic musician. That's something that I'm starting to work now, and hopefully by next year I will have some singles out as well.
Cool. And so you talked a little bit before about the new project. And so it's like Afro-Cuban house music. Can you delve a little bit more into like, any kind of instrumentals you have planned that's not confidential in any kind of a contract?
Right, right. It's not confidential. Um, Based on the success that I had in the 2000s with electronic music, we were doing mostly tribal house remixes. We were in the house scene back in the day. Now they call it Afro house. Um, and I have a lot of I'm from Panama, so I grew up with those roots as well. But also I grew up a lot with disco music. And I love also creating new disco, basically, what's going on now, what they call new disco, which is a little bit more modern, if I say, but it's the essence is the same. So what I'm trying to do with my project is mix both styles. It's like Afro house with new disco, basically using the percussions and all the stuff, the African percussions, and what makes it sound, Afro, but the bass lines and synthesizers from disco or new disco, right? Um, I might be putting some covers out first while I'm working with some of my co-writers and collaborators on more original music. I already have some of that, but I want to try putting some covers out for festivals. I'm doing some collaborations as well with DJs. I've done stuff with Esther Anaya. She's a big DJ violin player as well, and she's done a lot of things over the world. Played at Abu Dhabi for the Formula One um, close party. It was like a few years ago, and she's been around for a while. Also, an upcoming DJ. Her name is Roxy Ferrari. She's been playing at EDC and some of these biggest festivals and stuff. So I'm recording with her this week. I'm producing her as well. She's a rapper actually as well. So I'm trying to expand a little bit more in the electronica world, since it's something that I do very naturally. It's been kind of like some of my most successful years were with electronica and trying to go back kind of like full circle, but with my own sound and collaborating just with very specific artists, very specific DJs that I vibe with, that is very easy to work with, that we communicate very well, that we don't have to reinvent the wheel or basically, try to come out with something, that we have that very freedom, that allows us to flow in the studio. So along with producing for some DJs and also doing my own thing, that's I think was gonna be my focus. I've been doing some commercial work as well, some TV. I've done some film because I do a lot of film scoring as well. And I'm doing some commercials as well for Southeast Asia. Just finished one for Pepsi overseas. And yeah, and it's just whatever music takes me right now. And if it's something that I vibe with, that I like it, that I don't have to, that I like the concept, that I think I can be creative and I can enjoy the process, then I definitely get involved with.
Cool. It's always interesting to see sort of how the instrumentals actually translate to like electronic music production. And so with algorithmic music, like you program out the drum beats and instead of
Mhm.
having, like maybe one or two sets of hi-hats, you now have a choice of like hundreds, maybe even thousands, and you don't have to
Right.
worry about adjusting the cymbals or tuning the drums or anything else. And so that was always sort of incredible to look at, and you can tune everything in a perfectly finite manner. That I think is interesting. If you've heard of, have you ever heard of Strudel? It's a computer program for programming music.
What's his name of it?
Strudel. It's like,
Strudel. It's funny because I don't. I know almost every software and plugin in the market, and I don't know that one.
okay.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
young.
yeah.
It's probably a few years old, but do you mind if I ask what kind of software you're using right now for electronic music and anything in production?
I use Studio One. I use Studio One, and when I work on, that's what I create and I mix. That's what I carry my laptop. That's what I have in um my studio computer as well. I'm not opposed to Pro Tools. Like I do Pro Tools when I go to all the studios, but mostly for recording. Um, but for creative work, and mixing. I like Studio One. Now they got bought by Fender, so now they call it Fender Studio, which is all of us that we've been like Studio One long time users for like over 10 years. Like we're kind of like, you know, a little bit scared about the new name. I mean, I'm a guitar player as well. My first instrument is piano, but I play guitars and bass as well. And I love Fenders, and I have four Fender guitars. And I still find it kind of weird to call myself a Fender Studio Pro. It's kind of weird. But anyway, I love it because it sounds amazing, and it's very easy to work in that environment, that I have created. So it's a German software. They're amazing.
Cool. Yeah. The days of going to the drum offs at Guitar Center are a long ways back. But
Yeah.
guitar they always had a very, very different personality from the drummers. They were more like frontmen than anything else. And a lot of times they're both. And so in terms of music development and charts, so one of the things that I thought was interesting is that when you look at Grammy nominations and Grammy Awards versus just raw plays, like there's like often some kind of like a dichotomy. And so like for European electronic artists, some of these are like 30, years old, like Scooter and the Prodigy that
Mhm.
are played, hundreds of millions, if not, billions of times. And so no Grammy wins, but the songs are incredibly popular. And like if you mentioned
Yeah.
those band names, like anybody in electronic music, knows them. And
Yeah.
so if you don't mind me asking, so where's the dichotomy between the Grammys and like actual and then like the actual charts? Because like there are records and artists who have won Grammys, and when you look
Mhm.
at the numbers, it's like tracks may have been played like like 100,000 times or less versus
Mhm.
hundreds of millions or billions, and so um that's kind of new to me.
Well, I mean, like I'm part of the Grammy Academy as well. I'm a voting member there, and yes, there's a lot of things about it. Just for example, like the whole concept of the Grammys, the raw concept, right? Is that it's all about the music, right? That's what we are supposed to understand, right? So because of that specific concept, you can get a nomination, when you don't have a lot of streams. Like I have friends of mine that got Grammys this year that don't have millions of streams, but they have amazing music, right? So I find that really good because to have millions or billions of streams, you have to have a lot of money behind. You gotta have a big label, you gotta have a miracle, a TikTok, viral video, or whatever, and all these things are very costly. So if we reserve uh, the Grammy recognition just for the artists that have that backing, then it kind of like dumps down, waters down also the quality of what gets nominated, because not everything that has hundreds of millions or billions of streams, musically speaking, is better than a lot of artists that probably produce something from their room, right? And they have really good stuff going on. Um, so in that regards, that's the logic. Like some artists infiltrate that nobody has heard, but they have an amazing album, an amazing piece of music, and they get nominated, and that helps them catapult into stardom, and they gives them opportunity. I completely support that, and I have voted for a lot of artists like that I personally know. Um, there's definitely, and this is something that is widely talked and we in the industry oppose. There's 15,000 voters, throughout the world, part of the academy, and not necessarily because we voted for an artist means that artist is gonna get nominated, let alone get a Grammy, right? Because there's these the labels have a lot to do with this thing too. The record labels have a lot of power in the Grammys because a nomination or a Grammy means money, means exposure, means um, promotion, So there's a lot of money dumped into these listening parties, basically, and which I don't oppose the listening parties. I have attended many of them, and when you play your music, you know, basically to many people, many musicians, and see if you can get some votes from them, right? Some support, right? It's called for your consideration. That's usually they call it. But at the end, even if you get a nice amount of votes, at least that you know people that are gonna vote for you, you know, you still get some of the biggest artists always nominated, the artists that we already know, right? And because they have that label support, there's a lot of business with this thing and this and that. So I wouldn't really put too much attention to like you say, there's a lot of artists that you have seen, how many hits Daft Punk had, for example, and like that's one of my favorite bands, Justice, for example. That's kind of like where I lean to when it comes to the new disco, French house type of music, right? And Justice just got a Grammy, with Tame Impala last year, and Justice has been around forever, and everybody knows that band, and they make really good music, and they finally got recognized because they had a record with Tame Impala, who had a lot of traction, right? So we can't judge the success of these bands because they get Grammys or not. You know what I mean? It's very nice to have a Grammy. I have some of my best friends, they have Grammys. Some of them have multiple Grammys. Um, the people that I work with, Erica Ender, she's got like 3 or 4 Grammys. Um, you know, um, Loss from the Jackie Boys, he's got a couple Grammys as well. Ali J, who's my co-writer for Live, we're both, she's nominated, I'm nominated, like, uh, and it's a beautiful thing to be part of that, but that doesn't really necessarily dictates the success of the artist, like you had artists that I was listening to I was checking this article and I forgot which artist. It's been around forever. Oh, for example, okay, The Weeknd. The Weeknd this year didn't get any nomination, not even one nomination, and he came out with an amazing album. And it's The Weeknd. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think he's been nominated before. I think he had Grammys before. I don't know. But that's just to tell you how odd this Grammy thing could be. We know that that album was great. We know that that album had a lot of big all stars, like, a lot of VIPs involved. It was a huge album, and I really enjoyed it. And it was made, it was done really well. And he didn't get any nominations this year. I don't think he even showed up. You know, it is what it is, like a billboard is one thing, it's all about plays, right? Like how many plays you get, and you get Billboard awards, right? And I got about 30 of them, you know what I mean? Like, but I have never gotten a Grammy. I've been nominated, but I have never gotten a Grammy, even though I have, you know, 30 top tens, right? Including 4 number 1s, so it's and those records didn't get Grammys. You know what I mean? Like, so they got nominated, but they didn't get any Grammys. You know what I mean? Some of them didn't even get nominated, and they were very big records, and some of them historic records, right? So that's the disconnection of it. Like, I can't really tell you, like, like now they're trying to include more people like us, the voters, and this and that. But this year's nomination, I was up for a nomination. Well, my artist, and myself and my co-writer, Kendra Erica, with a song called "Dance in the Fire" that we wrote, inspired by the LA fires and the whole thing. And he had a lot of support, and I think I must have gotten about 80 votes or something like that for best dance pop record of the year. And that's a lot of votes for one category, right? Because we worked that record hard, and we had a lot of celebrities, also vote for the record. We didn't get nominated, right? And when you see the nominations, the 5 nominations, these are all very big artists that already have 6 more nominations for the year, and that's when you see, oh, okay, yes, of course, you know what I mean? And some of them they don't even fit in that category, right? Of dance pop, They're more like pop, or they're more like a different category, not necessarily dance pop, but they're there, they're jammed there somehow. And when you see them, you're like, damn, I mean, like, sometimes you think about, say, is it even worth the effort? But one thing that I took from that campaign that we launched, promoting the record, for your consideration, right, for votes, I met a lot of amazing people, artists, and some of them I voted for, and some of them even got the Grammys, and these are those artists that you mentioned that perhaps didn't have 100 million, 50 million, 500 million plays. They were very, very good, and they were in categories that you don't have a lot of people as well in it. You don't have the Lady Gagas, you don't have, the Sabrina Carpenters, and the Billie Eilish, you know what I mean, that they have a huge machine behind them. So it can be discouraging in a way, but at the same time, it's a positive experience to be able to navigate the system and meet so many cool people that believe in your music the same way probably you believe in theirs, and I was able to listen to a lot of great records, and support a lot of great artists that don't even live here in LA, that they live in Nashville and Texas and stuff like that. So it's a beautiful culture. I just wish they could make more changes and make it more democratic, and do it like the way it's supposed to be. But it's the music industry, it's a music business, and there's a business behind it. So that's the part that you can't get rid of. And you don't want to either, because you gotta pay your bills. So it is what it is.
Yeah, I think it was always kind of heartwarming to see that, people are more fond of drawing lines when it comes to the business and entertainment versus like the business end of something like, Silicon Valley, where it's like everybody is the numbers they run. Like
Yeah.
that's the game.
Yeah.
So in
A
terms
numbers
of,
game.
yeah, and that's yeah, and so because of the constraints of their system and the way things are financed, and it's like venture capitalists have their own investors, and so like there's sort of this waterfall between where money moves that creates a lot of constraints on everybody, and so like it's like it has to happen within these time frames at this velocity versus the entertainment industry. It's like, you mentioned bands like Justice. It's like, Justice, I think, has been around for probably at least 20 or so years. Like the
Yeah.
Prodigy, Scooter, like, I mean, probably 30 or more years. Daft Punk, definitely 30 years, or
Yeah.
more. I mean, One More Time was, I used to listen to that on the way back from, I think, elementary school. And
Right.
so yeah, and so the sound signature of all of them is very, very different. You mentioned that, you liked disco, you're integrating elements of new disco into your tracks, and like that's definitely more present in bands like Daft Punk, Justice a little bit, but not as much as like the straight, breakbeat and sort of jump style that you get from Scooter or the Prodigy. Um,
Right.
and so when it comes down to all of that, and artist development, sort of how does your own path, your own passions, your own journey play into the way that you go for artist development and how you sort of run that?
Like, one of the things that might be in my life as a musician, as an artist, it might be a curse, or it might be, a blessing. I'm trying to figure it out. Is that I do have the flexibility of working in different styles of music, and I understand them very well, right? Authentically. Um, I love new disco, and I play bass, and I play my own bass lines, and I slap the shit out of that bass. You know what I mean? And I love it. Uh, at the same time, I can come up with an Afro track because my roots are very embedded there. And then compose a jazz score for a movie, because I studied jazz at Berkeley, in the 90s, and write an orchestral piece, 140, 120 piece orchestra, or a small ensemble, for a documentary, or for something. Like, I like pop music a lot. Like it's just I like different types of music. What I listen in my car is electronic music, is house music most of the time. A little bit of melodic techno. That's what I listen to in my car all the time. That's what I vibe with. That's when I travel and I go to the beach, that's what I put, right? That's what I listen to. But because of the extensive amount of music that I've been involved with throughout my life and the cultures that I have gravitated around and or sometimes being immersed in, I cannot show up in the studio, dude, every day and do the same shit. I will literally shoot myself. Like I can't. It will be like a freaking day job. I might as well just become an accountant, like a clerk, or something like that, and just like, hey, fuck it. I have to be able to mix it up. Like one day I'm doing, new disco. Next day I have something that is more retro R&B, and if you hear my music in those different styles that I cover, they're very authentic. It's like I grew up with those style. I'm not trying to imitate somebody that does R&B or somebody that does. Like I feel the music. Doesn't matter what style of music it is. I feel it like if I grew up with that music, you know what I mean? And essentially I did. I started when I was 4 or 5 years old making music. So I've been making music my entire life, and that's all I've done my entire life. So I have lived in those cultures in different countries. So when I approach development, to your question, um, I approach it, straight up from that mentality, like, okay, I'm doing a record that is rooted on retro R&B, Motown type of shit. But because I have the tribal thing and I have the new disco thing and I have all these melodies going around my head that I can't shut off 24/7, you will always see that come through with the bass lines. The swing, the vibe of the bass line might not be completely like 1970s black. It will have a little bit of a syncopation there or here, because I'm Latino and I like Afro house, you know what I mean? Or maybe the chords, I'll be using some synthesizers, some Juno 6 or Juno 60s, because I love synth pop and post punk music, right? The electric guitars, maybe I'm doing some funky guitars, but I have a little bit of drive in it because I like rock. So I think that's what will make my sound within the artist that I'm developing, very fresh, right? Like it's not gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna do exactly what everybody else does. No, it has the mixes of things, and that's what people recognize when they listen to my tracks. Is like it is this, but it's fresh. It's got something else, and that's because the mix of all these cultures, man, and all this music that I've been making. I spent 10 years doing straight up tribal house music, for 10 years, getting hits every day. Then I started doing Latino, and then I went back to new disco, and I was living within the culture, as a music lover, that I've been my entire life. I listen to a lot of music every time, and I was having this conversation not only with my girlfriend, but I was having this conversation with my dad once. It's like they asked me, like, "Do you always hear melodies?" And so I was like, "That's all I do. The whole day I listen to melodies in my head. Like I had to learn to live a life where I can be present talking to you, and I have three or four melodies going on in my head, about some record or something that I want to create. I just can't shut it off, and I tried for so many years, and eventually I learned to multitask with it. Like I'm talking to you right now, and I have bass lines just driving me crazy. I wake up and 3 in the morning to go to the bathroom, and then I have a guitar line or I have a synthesizer line or something that I want to do in the engineering side with compression and EQ and expanders or whatever. Like I just can't shut it off. So yeah, I think that's due to the amount of music that I have consumed and also created for over 30 years in the business. You know what I mean? So I apply all that and that creativity power, to the few artists that I develop. You know what I mean? And I try to also, if they're very young, sometimes I try to educate them by explaining them something. Okay, this is coming from this era, when we used to like. I have an artist. Her name is Angeli Chavez. She's Filipina American from Seattle. She's 21, and I developed her last year. Now we're in the process of doing business with a major, right? And when I was recording her, her music is very 80s, and she likes the new disco 80s R&B type of thing, pop. And I had to explain her, even though she loves it and she feels it. I had to tell her stories about me in high school, right? About a girl that I liked, or a party that I went, or something, and some record from Madonna, some record from Phil Collins, was playing, and that syncopation that the bass line had, and where that inspiration came from. So, and then I will put the video of that song, so she can transport herself to that era and understand the vibe, smell it, see the neon lights and all that shit. Um, and when she actually got it, her performance was like literally from somebody that had lived throughout that era, right? So I try to bring those elements to my artists, when I'm working with them, so they understand what we're doing, and if they relate to it, and they love it, and when they love it, they perform it, and they make that record theirs, not mine. So I have to tell those stories. I have to like go crazy and open up and tell them about my um my private, life, what I experienced as a 13-year-old, as a 15-year-old, and my first love and all that shit, right? Like in the music that I was listening back then, and what people were dancing in the clubs, and how we were creating the music, and they get so excited about it that they want to be part of that record, and they become part of that record, and they make that record theirs. When you listen to the final product, they didn't just perform the record, the song. They owned it, and that's my approach to developing artists. You know what I mean? Like, they tell me what they want, and then I'll take them through the experience of making that what they want and becoming what they want, right? So that's how I develop artists.
Cool. Yeah, I think I played drums in sort of punk rock bands, but way back in like this is like 2000, 2007, 2008, and so like this is you're looking at like 20 years after punk started to actually go more mainstream.
Right,
And
right, right.
yeah, and so it's like I swear to God, it is the bass players and the guitarists have a very different personality. And
Yeah.
it's the bass players have, so I don't know if this is true universally, but the bass players almost always had more of like this dangerous streak. Like the risk tolerance of the bass players was always a lot higher. You know,
Yeah.
and I think that it was fun and it was always interesting to see like sort of the energy, moving back and forth between everybody. But
The bass players are the freakiest one, like they are, because the bass player, you see, like a lot of people take for granted the bass players, and there's reasons why. Like I am a big bass line driven type of musician, and I learned that from some other big artists and big producers that were my mentors, right? Um, every piece of music that I create, you will hear that bass line, right? But it doesn't take over. It's a restrained, very unique, confident baseline. It's not gonna take over everything, but it's what drives it's the backbone of everything. And some bass lines are just the roots, it's just, marking the chord. But one thing that bass players have, because they're used to putting the bass, the foundation of the record, and sometimes they're not moving as much as the guitar player or the drummer, right? Let alone the keyboard player, he's probably somewhere in a different orbit, right? um yeah, the bass player has a different intention, and that intention, when you have a good bass player, that you can hear those bass lines, and you notice those bass lines, even if you're not a musician, you're just like, there's something about it that it grooves, That's the bass line, right? Like to be able to be that bass line, creator, that bass player, with those bass melodies, you got to have a brain setup that is different than the other guys, and not necessarily you're the one showing off at the front, like the guitar player or the singer or the drums, which is extremely physical, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the bass player right there. So if you're a bass player, you know what I mean. You know what I mean?
Uh, oh, yeah, plenty of stories with sort of bass players kind of miraculously kind of like going missing and reappearing. It's like
Yeah.
very, I mean, awesome people. They were a lot of fun to play with, but
Do
it's
you
like,
remember what's his name? The bass player from Jerry Lewis and the News. Do you remember him from the 80s? He had this image and he was always solid with his cigarette. Like he was the freakiest guy in the band. You know what I mean? It's just that thing. You see a lot of bass players that they're just there, but there's a relation between good bass lines and that mindset. You know what I mean? Good bass players with not necessarily bass players that can shred it and do crazy shit. I'm saying like that create melodies and bass lines that are memorable and they will last for decades or hundreds of years. Those bass players, they have a particular life and they have a particular mentality about music, about life, about everything, relationships, and all these things. It's funny that you touch that, and I tell you all this thing because you touch that different personality topic. Um, and you see sometimes some, you see some what you may call it, some things on the internet about like, the singer, and they put like equals how many girls he gets, the guitar player, the bass player, the drummer, and they put the keyboard player. Nobody. Anyway, I'm a keyboard player. I'm a piano player. That's my first instrument, but I think my personality goes more with the bass player. You know what I mean? So they definitely have different personalities. They have different approaches to life, to everything, man. And a lot of people don't see that. Like maybe us in the industry in the back, like when we talk and we talk about the stories of people that we know, hey, I know the bass player of that band. I mean, that guy was crazy, or the drummer or the singer, and we talk about this shit, and that's how you understand how different musicians can be, and then you go with string players, they're a whole different thing. Horn players, they're like gangsters, you know what I mean? Like it's just very crazy how, and the singers, that's a whole different conversation for a different, podcast, because they're musicians even though they don't consider themselves musicians, they don't hang out with us. Anyway, go on ahead, man. I'm just having a crack here with myself.
no, it's awesome. It brings me back to high school and everything when I used to play music.
Right, right.
And so like eternal bass lines that, like Wild Cherry, Play That Funky Music, White Boy, and then Earth, Wind, and Fire, September. Like two funk bass lines that are practically eternal in history. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, those come to mind. And so I don't mean to nerd out entirely, but it's like the math and the physics between like,
Mhm.
the vibrations and the attack and the decay rates of
Mhm.
anything within bass, especially in electronic, is actually really interesting. And yeah, it's almost married to the drums. Like the bass and drums are the
Yeah.
backbone of a musical skeleton. And so
Yeah.
um
It's funny because I every October I work in Panama on this TV show called Talent Pro. With Erica Enders. She created the foundation, she created a TV show, and this what it does. It's a live show, national, and it's like 3 million people watch the show and everything. It once a year, and they give scholarships to kids that have low resources, and they compete with different categories, three different categories, which is performance, like singing, composition, which is writing songs, and four categories. The other one's audio visual, which is like video, and the other one is dance, right? and I have the band. I'm directed the band. I'm synchronized to the TV. It's a whole complex situation, right? Um, but every like I started working with them 3 years ago. I started as a judge 7 years ago, but then they called me for to direct the band. And when they asked me, the producer of the show, where do you want to be on the stage? And I'm like, put me with the drummer and the bass player. You know what I mean? And I'm a keyboard player. I'm playing keys there. And I'm like, why? Like the director is always with the guitars, the percussions, and the rest of the band. It's like, as I'm a bass player, like I need to be in the with the foundation of the band. Like if I can lock with the foundation of the band and be able to direct them literally next to me and tell them, count them and stuff, then the rest of the band, they're gonna lock in and they're gonna play their parts the way there is. But if I can't have that synergy and that proximity, that energy to with the bass player and the drummer, I I don't feel that I'm locked in, that there's a synergy or whatever. But that's the thing. It's like I'm a piano player, but I'm like my personality is a bass player. I'm a bass player all the way, even though I don't have the skills and the bass that I have in piano. I play bass, but I'm not as skilled as I am with the piano, right? Which is what I studied my entire life. But I relate to the bass player, and that's the very first thing I write when I write an arrangement is a bass line. Now that you mentioned dance music, same, dude. That kick and that bass, they have to be on it and they gotta make sense and you sidechain it in a way that way they are able to coexist and breathe together and you can hear both of them and it's just like they're making love to each other. And that's what, drives people, even if you don't have hi-hats on top of it or anything. You have a bass and a kick, you got a full party. You know what I mean? And that's how important the bass is, whether it's electronic or it's a live bass or even, an upright bass in jazz or whatever. It's like so vibey. It's that's the life of the whole shebang. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's interesting to see sort of how that plays out with the syncopation. And so you look at bands like the Chemical Brothers or Justice, and the way that the bass lines, either begin to fade in into tracks and then change at certain junctures it's a lot different. And
Yeah.
there's more layering, and I wouldn't say it's almost like Latin-esque syncopation on
Mhm.
snares. So like you hear people play Latin beats. It's like the bridge between jazz and hip hop when it comes to
Yeah.
rhythm. And so
Yeah.
and
The,
I
the
think that
pocket, the pocket in Latin music is wider than in black music, for example. You always hit it a little bit behind the beat, right? With Latino, it's like a whole mile after. And it's because also the personality in, I don't know if it's the food, I don't know, the Latinos, they have a different swag, when it comes to music. And that's also why they're able to understand on a wider spectrum, other types of music throughout the world, because it's that complexity that Latino music has, which is African. It's a mix of African and Western, right?
a little bit, yeah. And so I don't know if you mentioned dance briefly. I don't know if you've ever played with capoeira before, like, but it's like you mentioned sort of the
Yeah.
the Afro house, and then you've mentioned Latin music. And so like there are styles of capoeira like capoeira batuque, which is like
Mm.
technically of African origin versus Brazilian. And so
Yeah.
and you look at the rhythm and you look at the flow of the movement, and it's like there's similarity, but like the
Mm.
way that the structure is held is like a lot different in terms of capoeira batuque. That's
Yeah.
probably
Yeah. Yeah.
that's tangential aside from
No,
from
it's fine. I love martial arts. I did a study a little bit of it back in the days and stuff, and I'm a fan of martial arts, and I know you practice martial arts. And yeah, and what you're comparing with capoeira, in African, yeah, there's a difference. Yeah, the root might be like in music, like African, the technique and stuff, but the interpretation of it, is slightly different. And it's very authentic to Brazil. You know what I mean? In this case, in music with Cuba and the Caribbean, the way we we use those African instruments or whatever. It's different. So when I make tribal music or Afro house, like I totally, literally click, I totally connect to my Latin roots. And that's, I think, what makes it different than when other artists and DJs in the world that are non-Latinos, or are not Africans, are making Afro house. They're literally sampling stuff from Splice and putting it there, and that's how it works. But there's a difference when you understand it. Like if you practice capoeira, for example, you understand where it comes from. You understand the root, the history of it, and the reason why it was practiced, right? Um, Same with the in Brazil. I think it had to do with the slaves, and they had to be able to fight in a way that they didn't look that they were fighting, so they wouldn't get reprehended or by the patrons, right? By the for the slave masters, right? So they had to do it in kind of like in an artistic way. Um, that way they didn't get caught that they were actually kicking each other's ass. You know what I mean? So that's why I understand where it came from in Brazil. You know what I mean? Like the way they had to do it, they had to give it a different spin, and maybe that has a lot to do with why in Brazil, stylistically might vary a little bit the comparison to Africa, right?
I suppose, I mean, in terms of African Brazilian history, I don't know as much about that. But with capoeira and the musical crossover, like there are a couple of martial arts that involve like, singing and rhythmic,
Yeah.
actual beats. And so I can't remember what the string instrument for capoeira is called, but it's there, and like, and they'll play it
Mhm.
into movements, almost like it's kind of like a music video. Ch
Right, right, right.
yeah, the Chinese martial arts like Bagua, like they will have like singing to it, but it's very different. It's like capoeira was practiced, so people would know as fighting. Bagua was designed for like bodyguards and everybody else, and so
Right, right.
um, but yeah, and like there's rhythm and there's syncopation. It doesn't matter if you're playing bass, you're playing drums, or you're sort of dancing back and forth, and like that's pretty apparent in music videos, whether it's something from Grimes where like they're waving knives around on a tennis court, or
Yeah, I
like
love Calypso.
yeah.
It's crazy.
No, the videos are nuts, but they're a lot of fun to watch.
It's just like what I love about music in general, and I think in my case that I've gone so far already, in music, like I've done so much in so many different situations, and I have been in studio with some of the most talented people and some of the craziest people I've met in my life, right? With the craziest stories that I have been fortunate to learn, from them because I believe that we gather experience through life, not only by living life, but also by understanding and learning from other people's experiences, right? And whether you incorporate those experiences or not to your life. So the fact that you're able to learn so much from so many people and just go and be able to appreciate the art that people like, artists like Grimes, for example, and then radically different people like Justice, and then all of a sudden you go to the other side of the spectrum with The Weeknd, and then somebody as fucking talented as Lady Gaga that I relate so much to because she's a real musician and piano player, and she just fucking loves it, and she's very intense, and I'm very intense with my music, right? That's an artist that I would love to eventually like be able to be in a room and work with her and just go crazy about the music, right? Um, like be able to understand so many different things, and that's why now it brings me back to our original conversation. That's why I think now is the perfect time for me to go and do solo music, solo stuff, and I had to, I'm consulting with a friend of mine that is helping me brand, my project, and we going back and forth. And for the last 6 months, 7 months, I've been just like, what am I gonna do musically for myself? Because I've always been the one developing somebody else, whether it's a VIP major artist or a new artist. I've been the one behind the console. I've been the one guiding them how to express, sing. I've had these sessions where some artists have cried, some of them have screamed of joy, and like I've been that person with who they tap into, as an energy source, to relieve themselves and be able to become themselves. But I have never done it with myself before, and it's weird AF, to like focus and say, who am I as an artist? Who am I gonna be? You know, and I've been working on that, and especially after so many different styles of music that I consistently work on, what am I gonna choose for myself? What I choose to do? If I have to pick one thing, how do I mix it with other things to make it more me? So yeah, and that comes from the appreciation of so many different artists that you love, like their art, each one of them is so fucking different, and they tap into so many different energy sources. Some of them very light, you know what I mean? Some of them very dark, and I think as an artist, you gotta be able to tap into all those energies to be able to create stories. It's like a Jedi, dude. Luke Skywalker, you know what I mean? He's in the Force, and he goes in the dark side, and in the other side, and he mix things, and he becomes this masterful Jedi. And I think that's what a musician, a real musician like Lady Gaga, like Grimes, The Weeknd, or some of these contemporary, even Fred Mercury back in the day, you had to tap into the entire spectrum of the force, of the energy, to be able to create, channel those energies, like some fucked up experiences that you had, be able to lift them again for a few minutes, extract that energy and put it into music, and some joyful energies as well. And that's how you're able to create probably the best music you're able to create with this universe.
Yeah, that was always the fun thing about entertainment because it's like, you go to like acting classes, whatever. And they're like, yeah, like we want you to scream and cry. And then it's like you go to a business meeting and like you're sitting around with board members and it's like you start
Mhm.
screaming and crying and it's just, it's like it's totally different world. Like and so it's always
Yeah.
fun kind of to see that intersection.
Well, I mean, I guess just my solo project, like I think that since that's my focus, I'm trying, I'm like something happened in New Year's, weeks ago that it made me flip and change my direction in my music and how I'm going to approach everything, right? So I'm putting a lot of effort into my solo project and also into visuals, TV, film, advertisement, into branding, so and since they go hand to hand, they go together, I think that's the perfect direction that I can take now. I will still continue to work with artists, especially the ones that align with the purpose that I have, making great music. I don't want to really sit down and make soulless and stupid lyrics and stuff that is like bubblegum, like Sugar Rush. Like it hits you really hard and then it just drops, Like I really want to make music that transcends and becomes, historic and legacy, So that's my focus now. I think I owe that to myself, because I've been in, like I said, producing for so long, and making other artists sound really great. Now I think it's time to focus on, in a part of my artistry that I enjoy, and that I can actually leave, a legacy with, you know what I mean? So which is that's what I'm working on. And I think, maybe this year I'll be able to put some stuff. I'm gonna probably put some soft releases first, test the waters and see what's up. But I'm gonna start pushing next year pretty hard on that, and try to use some of that music also for advertisement. You'll be able to hear some of this, in TV shows and brands and movies and stuff like that as well. So I think that's where I'm heading. I know that's where I'm heading to.
I look forward to hearing it and then seeing if it ends up on another Pepsi Twist commercial. Um,
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, and like the math behind the audio visual computing is actually pretty fascinating because you've got the physics of the sound waves, and then you've got the physics of the waves that are on like the equalizers and something you'd see like an iTunes equalizer.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
and so the merging of that is it's pretty beautiful. All right.
It's nice. But it's been awesome, dude. Thank you for the opportunity.
Anytime. It was a lot of fun talking.
Yeah, definitely. And hit me up when when you want to release it. I'll link and I'll send it to a lot of people as well. And, you know, looking forward to the next one.
Thank you so much. I'll consider maybe trying to make AI music. I think that I'm out of practice with the drums, but with the computer, it'll be I'm curious to see if I can cook something up.
Well, maybe next one we can talk about AI. That's a whole different conversation.
All right. Sounds good.
All right, brother. Take care now.